Have you ever noticed that the tighter you grip a handful of sand, the faster it escapes through your fingers? It's a straw. We humans imagine that if we only hold on firmly enough, if we only tighten our will, our discipline, our plans, then life will finally do what we ask of it. But life is not a machine. Life is not a dog on a leash. Life is more like water, and you cannot hold water by clenching your fist. It slips, it glides, it finds its own way. The more you try to control life, the more it slips away. This may sound like a contradiction, but it is the most natural truth of all. A truth you already know instinctively, but perhaps you haven't dared to trust. You see, from the moment you were born, you were taught to believe that existence is something to dominate, something to conquer, something to wrestle into submission. You were told to master yourself, master your future, master your emotions, master your destiny. It's a very heroic image, but it's also a very lonely one, because control is always an act of fear. Fear that life will betray you, fear that you are not enough, fear that without constant effort, everything will fall apart. But life is not the enemy, and you are not separate from it. Imagine for a moment that you're standing at the shore, watching waves rise and crash and recede. If you run into the water and try to push the waves back, you'll exhaust yourself, and the sea won't budge. But if you float, if you trust, the ocean carries you. It's not that you surrender to anything, it's that you rediscover you were never separate from the tide. Now, when I speak of letting go, people often misunderstand. They think I'm advocating laziness, resignation, or indifference. But letting go is not giving up. It is the recognition that clinging is futile, that life flows best when you stop insisting it move according to your timetable. Consider your breathing. Right now, you are inhaling and exhaling without any conscious effort. Try to force your breath. Try to deliberately control every moment of it, and you'll quickly find it becomes uncomfortable, awkward, even strained. Yet the moment you stop trying, your breath finds its rhythm. Life is like that, self-regulating, self-balancing, self-flowing. But the ego, this little wave that believes it is separate from the ocean, imagines it must control everything. It clings to certainty the way a drowning man clings to a piece of driftwood, forgetting the entire sea beneath him will hold him afloat if he stops fighting. The ego is terrified of the unknown, terrified of uncertainty, terrified of surrender. And so the ego says, if only I grip tightly enough, everything will go according to plan. But plans are made of paper, while life is made of wind, and you cannot force the wind to behave. Let me tell you a small story. There was once a man who lived his life trying to predict the future. Every day he woke up worrying about what might go wrong, the weather, the markets, the health of his family. He read every forecast, every analysis, every rumor. He believed that if he could know everything, he could prevent anything. But life, mischievous as always, had its own ideas. One day his predictions came true. Another day they failed completely. And he found himself tired, anxious, perpetually bracing for impact. Then one evening, as he sat watching his children play, he noticed something remarkable. They weren't planning their laughter. They weren't strategizing their joy. They were simply present, completely immersed in the moment. He realized then that control had never given him security, only stress. And letting go was not the collapse he feared. It was the freedom he longed for. Now, this doesn't mean that you abandon responsibility or float through the world with no concern for anything. That would be foolish. It simply means you engage with life as a dance rather than a battle. In a dance, you do not seize your partner and drag them across the floor. You listen, you feel, you move with them. The beauty arises not from domination, but from harmony. To live is to dance with the unknown. And there's something very gentle, very tender in this recognition. Life is not asking you to control it. It is inviting you to participate in it, to move with its rhythms instead of fighting them. And when you stop fighting, something miraculous happens. You begin to notice the subtleties, the quiet spaces between moments, the delicate unfolding of each day. You realize that every event, even the ones you resisted, has shaped your path in ways you could never have orchestrated through sheer will. Think of all the most meaningful things in your life, the people you love, the the experiences that changed you, the encounters that awakened you. How many of them did you actually plan? How many arrived unexpectedly, through coincidence, chance, or seeming accident? Life, when you let it, has a way of placing you exactly where you need to be. But to see this, you must loosen your grip. You must breathe, you must soften, because the more tightly you hold, the less you can receive. And that is the first real paradox of freedom. The doorway opens the moment you stop trying to force it. Now you may wonder, if I don't control life, won't everything fall apart? This is the question the ego whispers in the quiet hours of the night, that trembling doubt that without constant vigilance, without tightening your grip, chaos will swallow you whole. But look closer. Look at the trees. They grow without forcing themselves upward. Look at the flowers. They open without consulting a schedule. Look at your own heart. It beats without asking your permission. There is an intelligence woven through existence that far surpasses anything the human mind can calculate. An intelligence that breathes the tides, that spins the stars, that orchestrates the seasons. And yet, we imagine we must micromanage our little corner of the cosmos, as though everything depends on our anxiety. It's a bit like standing in the middle of a river, screaming at the current to go left instead of right. The river doesn't mind your shouting. It simply flows around you, patient and unbothered, waiting for you to realize you're only tiring yourself. The strange thing is that even when life flows in ways we don't expect, sometimes, especially then, it's moving us towards something we could not have foreseen. But we resist. Oh, how we resist. We resist change. We resist uncertainty. We resist the natural rise and fall of things. And in resisting, we create suffering, an unnecessary tension born not from life itself, but from our insistence that it behave in ways it never promised to. Imagine trying to keep a candle flame perfectly still in an open field. The very attempt makes you anxious, desperate, and fragile. But let the flame dance, and suddenly it is beautiful. Life is like that flame. Its beauty comes from movement, from unpredictability, from spontaneity. Yet the ego says, no, hold still, stay the same, don't change, control everything. And so we cling, we tighten, we plan, we calculate. We exhaust ourselves trying to preserve a version of life that no longer exists. But there is a gentle liberation, almost a sigh of relief, when you finally accept that life will move, with or without your blessing. You begin to discover a deeper trust, not in some external force, but in the very fabric of existence. And that trust feels like an exhale. It feels like the moment you stop trying to impress people, like the moment you stop pretending to be who you think you should be, like the moment you stop tightening inside. Do you know that feeling? When something shifts, subtly, quietly, and you realize you don't need to push anymore. That is the beginning of freedom. But let us go deeper. Control is a disguise for fear. Fear of losing what you love. Fear of not becoming who you hope to be. Fear of the unknown. That vast, untamed wilderness beyond your plans and expectations. But you cannot avoid the unknown. Every moment of your life emerges from it. You breathe in uncertainty with every breath. And if you look honestly, truly honestly, you'll see that the most beautiful things come from that same uncertainty. Love, for instance. You cannot control love. You cannot schedule it, predict it, or contain it. Try to possess it, and it withers. Try to command it, and it retreats. Love is a guest, not a prisoner. It arrives on its own terms and leaves when its work is done. And yet, the more open you are, the more freely it flows. Control cannot create love. Control cannot sustain love. Control cannot deepen love. Only presence can. Only openness can. Only surrender can. And the same is true of joy. Have you noticed that your happiest moments were rarely the ones you planned? They were the spontaneous ones, the unexpected laughter, the unplanned adventure, the unforeseen connection. Joy sneaks in through the cracks you weren't guarding. It visits when you stop trying to manufacture it. This is why life slips away, the more you try to control it. You are too occupied clutching your idea of life to embrace the actuality of life. You are so focused on directing the play that you forget to watch it. And what a tragedy that is, to miss the very life you are living because you're too busy trying to choreograph it. Now, let us turn to a quieter, softer truth. When you relinquish control, you do not become powerless. Quite the opposite. You become aligned with the very movement of existence. You become graceful, Not graceful in the sense of elegance, but in the sense of ease, the way a bird drifts on rising air currents, letting the wind do what it has always done, not resisting, not struggling, not demanding, simply moving with the flow that was always there. When you let go, life begins to feel less like a burden you must carry, and more like a river carrying you, not pushing you faster than you can go, but carrying you at the pace of your own unfolding. Because life is not in a hurry. The cosmos is not rushing. The universe has never been late. You are the one who thinks you must hurry. And so you chase, you grasp, you strain. But life waits for you to remember that it has its own rhythm. And when you fall into that rhythm, something inside you relaxes, something unclenches, something softens. You discover a new way of being, not passive, not lazy, but awake, attentive, receptive. You begin to notice the small beauties, the way sunlight falls on the floor, the texture of silence in the early morning, the subtle shifts of your own emotions. And each of these becomes a teacher, whispering, "See, you don't need to control this. You only need to be here." The art of living is not the art of controlling life. It is the art of participating in it, fully, deeply, without resistance. If you listen closely, you may notice something subtle. The fear of losing control is often greater than the fear of what happens when you actually let go. We imagine that surrender is catastrophic, that if we stop tightening our grip, everything will collapse into chaos. And yet, again and again, when life forces us to release our hold, through illness, heartbreak, failure, or unexpected change, we discover something astonishing. The world continues, we continue. Life moves, and sometimes it moves more beautifully than before. Because when the illusion of control dissolves, something essential reveals itself. You were never steering the ship alone. You are the ocean as much as the wave, the dancer as much as the dance, the experiencer as much as the experience. The boundary you protect so fiercely, between me and life, between my will and what happens, is thinner than you think. It is a line drawn in water. Consider for a moment how often life surprises you with something better than you expected. The job you didn't get that opened the way to a better one. The relationship that ended to make space for a deeper love. The failure that humbled you into wisdom. The pause that allowed you to breathe again. You could not have planned these things. You could not have controlled their timing. Life blossoms according to its own unfolding, not your schedule. And here is the great irony. When you stop trying to control everything, you become more capable, more alive, and more responsive to what actually is. A mind obsessed with control is rigid, and rigidity breaks. A mind that trusts the flow is fluid, and fluidity adapts. Think of bamboo in the wind. It bends, it sways, it yields, but it does not break. Yet a rigid tree, strong and unbending, snaps in the storm. To live is to bend. To surrender is to remain unbroken. Now some may feel that surrender sounds passive, but surrender is not passivity. It is participation. It is the difference between clinging to the edge of the riverbank and stepping fully into the current. In one, you strain. In the other, you move. Let me offer another image. Imagine you are learning to swim. If you panic, if you thrash, if you try desperately to control every movement, you sink. But if you relax, if you trust the water, if you allow your body to float, the water supports you effortlessly. It's always been this way. The water did not change. Only your relationship to it did. Life is the same. The moment you trust it, it holds you. The moment you tense, it feels like it's drowning you. You cannot swim by fighting the water. You swim by cooperating with it. And cooperation is not control. It is harmony. Now let's explore something even deeper. The fear behind control is the fear of impermanence. We cling because everything changes. We grasp because nothing stays. We try to control life because we cannot bear the truth that life is movement. But what if change is not the enemy? What if impermanence is the very source of beauty? Think of music. A note only becomes music because it ends. Hold the note forever and there is no melody. Think of breath. Inhale forever and you suffocate. Exhale forever and you collapse. Life lives in the alternation, the rise and fall, the coming and going, the give and take. Even love, as precious as it is, must breathe. It must expand and contract, appear and disappear, soften and intensify. To demand that love never change is to ask a flame to remain frozen. It cannot. Its very nature is movement, and so is yours. When you stop resisting the impermanence of things, you discover a strange serenity. Not because everything lasts, but because you no longer need it to. You begin to see that clinging does not preserve anything. To love someone is not to hold them tightly. It is to allow them to be fully themselves. To witness their unfolding without turning them into a possession. To experience joy is not to trap it in a jar labeled happiness. It is to savor it while it is here and let it go when it dissolves. To live is not to build walls around your heart. It is to allow life to move through you freely. And paradoxically, the moment you stop trying to force life to stay the same is the moment you feel most at home in it. Because home is not a fixed place. It is a state of openness, a trust in the movement of things. Now, there is another dimension to all this, one that is often overlooked. When you let go of control, something remarkable happens. You begin to listen, not just with your ears, but with your whole being. You listen to intuition, to subtle impulses, to the quiet nudges of life guiding you. These signals were always present, but you could not hear them over the noise of your own striving. It's like tuning a radio. If you turn the dial frantically, you only hear static. But if you move slowly, gently, with sensitivity, suddenly the signal appears, clear, resonant, unmistakable. Life speaks in whispers. Control shouts, and in shouting it drowns out the very guidance you need. Letting go is the art of hearing again. It is the art of sensing where life wants to take you. Not in a mystical or predetermined sense, but in the deep, intuitive way that arises when you stop forcing your own agenda. Because there is a movement within you that is wiser than your plans, a natural unfolding that does not conform to your fears or expectations. And when you trust it, you feel something profoundly simple. I am exactly where I need to be. Not because everything is perfect, not because you have achieved your goals, but because you are aligned with the moment. And the moment is always the only place you can truly live. There is a certain peace that emerges when you stop arguing with reality. Not a forced peace, not a philosophical peace, but a lived peace. The peace that comes when you are no longer spending all your energy trying to push the river upstream. In that peace, you can finally see life as it is, not as an enemy to be defeated, not as a puzzle to be solved, not as a project to be perfected, but as a companion, playful, unpredictable, intimate. Life is not something happening to you. Life is something happening with you. And when you realize this, a quiet joy wraps itself around your existence. You begin to see each moment not as an obstacle or an evaluation, but as a partner in a dance you never quite learned, yet somehow have always known. Because beneath all the noise, beneath all the fear, beneath all the frantic attempts to control, there is something in you that already trusts life, something ancient, something spacious, something unbroken, the part of you that watched your first sunset without needing to understand it, the part of you that laughed as a child without needing a reason, the part of you that has always known deep down that life is not a problem, it is an experience. Let me share something with you. The universe is not structured like a machine. It's not a system of rigid gears turning mechanically towards some predetermined outcome. It is more like a symphony, improvisational, spontaneous, unfolding in patterns far too complex for the mind to map. You are not a cog in that symphony. You are an instrument within it. Your role is not to control the music, but to play your part with sincerity, curiosity, and presence, trusting that the other instruments, the other movements, the unseen threads of the composition, are doing the same in their own way. When you attempt to control everything, you shrink your role to a single anxious note. But when you let go, your note becomes part of the melody, and you finally hear it, the harmony you always feared was missing. Now, surrendering control does not mean abandoning direction. Life will still invite you to make choices, to express desires, to take action. But the energy behind those actions changes. Instead of striving, you flow. Instead of forcing, you respond. Instead of clinging, you participate. It's the difference between pushing a boat with all your strength and raising a sail. One exhausts you, the other carries you. Letting go is the raising of the sail. It is the recognition that life moves with a wind of its own, and that your task is not to command the wind, but to catch it. And when you do, something begins to happen, something you may have spent your whole life longing for. a sense of alignment, not with some external purpose or cosmic mission, but with your own being. Because when you relinquish the need to control life, you create the space to actually feel it. You taste your food, you hear the rain, you look into a loved one's eyes without the constant interference of plans and fears and calculations. You return to the simple miracle of being, and in that simplicity you discover something profound. You are not separate from life. You have never been separate from life. The wave does not control the ocean, because the wave is the ocean. You do not control life, because you are life. What you call letting go is simply remembering this. It is remembering that breath breathes you, that awareness perceives through you, that life expresses itself as you, in this moment, in this body, in this fleeting constellation of thoughts and sensations. You are not the manager of existence. You are its witness, its participant, its expression. And this brings us to the quiet heart of the matter. The more you try to control life, the more it slips away, because the one who is trying to control it is a phantom. The ego is a story, a useful story, a functional story, but a story nonetheless. It imagines itself to be the author of life, the commander of circumstances, the master of outcomes. But the deeper truth is that you are not the author. You are the page. You are not the controller. You are the unfolding. Letting go is not something you do. It is something that happens naturally the moment you stop pretending you are separate from the flow of things. And when this is seen, truly seen, you enter a different way of being. You move with life as it moves. You allow beginnings to begin and endings to end. You trust the rhythms of your own becoming. And you discover, perhaps for the first time, that life has never been slipping away from you. Life has been carrying you. Always, effortlessly, intimately. All that ever slipped away was your illusion of control. And without that illusion, what remains? A profound stillness, a warm curiosity, a tenderness toward everything that arises, a gratitude for the sheer, improbable fact of existence. And in that space you may whisper to yourself, gently, truthfully, I am here, and here is enough. Let life move, let life breathe. Let life unfold in its own mysterious, unpredictable, exquisite way. And you simply be.